With Michael Penix's season being over, it's all about the Falcons defense. That's going to keep us invested for the rest of 2025.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now the number one sports podcast in America, also the world, the solar system, and yes, number one in the galaxy. And today's Locked On Falcons is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL. And you'll get $20 off your first purchase. So if you don't know me, I'm your humble host, Aaron Freeman. Been covering the Falcons for almost 2 decades. And today I am joined by Jarvis Davis of Locked On Sports Atlanta. And we will be talking about life after Michael Penix, focusing on 2025, not the beyond, because there's so many unknowns about that. We'll look ahead to this Week 12 hateful matchup between the Falcons and Saints, and just the hate isn't quite what it used to be because of circumstances. We'll talk about that. And, you know, what's at stake for the season? Is it just really now that the quarterback is no longer sort of the option? Is it really just about looking at this young defense? We can get into all of that. But, you know, I want to thank all of you that are everydayers of this podcast that are the reason why shows like Locked On Falcons and so many others across the Locked On Podcast Network have now allowed that network to be the number one sports podcast in the galaxy. All you have to do to become an everydayer and make these podcasts your first listen each and every day is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So, Jarvis, as I said, you know, we're dealing with life after Michael Penix. There's a lot of discussion. You know, the biggest point of contention amongst people talking about the Atlanta Falcons is what is Penix's future beyond 2025, since we know his 2025 season is over. We're not going to focus on that on today's episode, although I'm sure there will be perhaps conversations later. You know, that third segment, for those of you that are everydayers of this podcast, you know, they tend to go off the rail. So I have no idea what we'll be getting into towards the end of the episode. You know, me and Jarvis will get up to some nonsense and shenanigans as per usual. But we know that the Falcons are going to have to deal with the next 7 games without Michael Penix, Kirk Cousins back at the helm. But, you know, it's really kind of a devastating blow because it's like, Penix was kind of the main reason to watch the Falcons and stay invested in the season, even with it not going the way that we wanted to go with this 3-7 start. And now it's like, what else is there? And so I'm curious for you. You know, I know you and I are both contractually obligated to be invested in the remainder of the Falcons season, but, you know, beyond, for those folks that are listening that aren't necessarily getting a check for watching the games on Sundays, what do you think they should be, you know, keying on for these next 7 weeks?
Focus on the D, man. That's like, if you don't do anything else in life, focus on the D, because the last 2 first round picks, or the most recent 2 first round picks, those are the guys you need to keep an eye on. James Pierce Jr., Jalen Walker, this whole entire class, really. Xavier Watts, those guys have been, Billy Bowman. You know, I was just thinking about how Xavier Watts started the season. You know, he had the picks, and he was looking like going to be that guy, and then now he's gotten a little quiet. You know, so I think that watching a guy like him and his development, what could he be? Could he be good enough to at least allow you to consider and moving on from Mr. Bates? Because at the end of the day, an expensive safety on a team that's not going to make the playoffs, that made no sense whatsoever. So I feel like there are a lot of things just from stuff like Xavier Watts, seeing he's going to be able to make the move free free safety and be that guy going forward, be a young piece, a foundational piece like we talked about. Jalen Walker, James Pierce Jr., are we going to get a Braylon Trice sighting at any point during this year? So could we? Is it possible? Maybe not. I don't know. That's a name. That sounds like a name that you haven't brought up or talked about in a while. So it's just the defensive pieces are the ones to me that stand out, that I'll be looking forward to watching. And offensively, you always got the blue magic. Gotta be John Robinson.
He's an entertainer and an icon. Yes.
Say it again.
He's an entertainer and an icon.
Absolutely. One time, big time. And the guy who's going to be handing the ball off to him, Kirkington, for those of you who missed it, please go check out the Falcon Squad show on Locked On Sports Atlanta. And you can check it out right here on Locked On Falcons. You ain't got to go nowhere. You can check it out here too. That'll explain the reference. But yeah, there are a lot of good, not a lot. So me slow down. There are some things that you can be on the lookout for, look forward to, and I feel like it starts on the defense side of football.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Jarvis. I tend to agree. Yeah, we'll see what the future of this offense is going to be. We know Bijan and Drake are going to be a big part of that, but are we going to get to see Drake the rest of the season? I think that's an open question at this stage. Again, right now it's like, okay, well, he's not going to play this week, but we'll see after that. And it's like, all right,
Ooh, this just dropped in on me. Will Terry be allowed to give Drake an extension?
See, these are all, I didn't want to get into 2026 stuff. I know, but I think we have to talk about 2026 stuff. And so I think that's a good jumping off point before we circle back to this Saints game about Drake and talk about Jessie, because he's another guy that was a extension candidate after this season. I remember having a conversation with Trayshawn Diaz, your boy, who you're going to go to a seafood place in Mobile next year without me, but
well, that's still up for discussion. We can talk about that. You know what I'm saying? Probationary periods, bro.
Okay. That's a reference for like 3 people. Yes. But I remember talking with Trayshawn about can you convince Jessie to sign an extension if you don't win this year? And now it's kind of like, if you're not winning this year, then what's the point of trying with Jessie, as you said? So I think that's a good conversation to have, and we'll continue that conversation and talk more about whether or not, given the circumstances of this year, is it right to pay Drake the big bucks as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Since you and I make decisions every day, if you go over to PrizePicks, those decisions can get you paid. Don't miss any of the excitement of this sports season, whether you're following the NFL or NBA or both. There's no better time to jump in on the action. Just pick more or less on at least 2 and up to 6 player stat projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. And the beautiful thing about PrizePicks is just you versus the projections. You don't have to worry about if other people are, in the same mindset as you and taking more on Bijan Robinson rushing yards or less on Darnell Mooney receiving yards. All you have to do is take advantage of this opportunity by downloading the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL for $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. And today's episode is also brought to you by John Foy Associates. And some firms do it all, whether we're talking divorce or criminal or real estate. And sometimes, they like to dabble in injury cases. That could cost you. Without the right focus, you may never get the attention that you deserve. And at John Foy Associates, they focus 100% on personal injury law, car accidents, truck crashes, serious injuries. That's it. So when you call them, you're not getting a lawyer. juggling different types of cases. You're getting a team built to win for you. And the best part, you absolutely pay nothing until John Foy wins your case, no upfront costs. So if you've been injured in a car accident by a negligent driver, don't let the insurance company rip you off. Get the justice and money you deserve by calling John Foy and Associates today at 404-400-4000. That's 404-400-4000, or visit johnfoy.com to get started. They don't just settle, they win. Get the strong arm. Call attorney John Foy and Associates today. So before we get into this conversation about, 2026 and who's getting the big bucks, I want to thank each and every one of you that is an everydayer of this podcast and making Locked On Podcast Network your team every day, the number one sports podcast in the galaxy. So Jarvis, where do you want to go? You want to go Jessie Bates or Drake London first?
Let's go Drake first, because I know Jessie is near and dear to your heart. So I know
yes.
That you got your bearings together before we
And we spent a lot of time this spring talking about the big extension that seems inevitable for Drake London, given the type of seasons he's had and he's still having, even though this season may not be as good as I think a lot of people expected for Drake. It's still a very good season for Drake, in large part due to the fact that he's kind of had to carry the Falcons passing attack for the vast majority of this season. And so, that was kind of the question I think a lot of people had was, is Drake a true blue number one wide receiver, or is he just a number one because he gets the most targets? But is he a number one in the sense of, can he kind of carry an offense? And obviously this offense overall is underachieving, but that's through no fault of Drake London at this point in time. So I'm curious, Jarvis, where do you sort of stand with, extending Drake, especially when you don't necessarily know for certain if who's going to be throwing him the football, and not only in the near future, because we've been talking all week about, the potential for a bridge quarterback to start 2026. Is Michael Penix coming back? When he's coming back, is he the long-term, option? Do the Falcons pivot towards a different quarterback in 27? All these things are in flux right now. And do you just kind of pay Drake just to have some security and some stability there? Or do you kind of let it all play out and maybe wait and see?
That's a tough one, man, because as much as I love Drake, I wholeheartedly believe in building teams from the inside out. And when you think about where they are from an offensive line standpoint, I think we called it, man. Like, maybe they should have took a chance on that young tackle Carson Vincent out of Alabama A&M. You would be able to get him with some low draft capital, and of course he went to the Ravens because that's what the Ravens do. They draft well, they find guys, and they get guys in their system, and they develop them, and they go on to do really well. So yeah, we can be jealous of them for quite some time. I've been, that's just me. But you think about where you are on the offensive line. You already paid Chris, so he's going to be around. You signed Caleb to what at the time seemed like a reasonable deal. And what is he going to do? Where is he going to be next year? Is he going to be anywhere near where he was, the previous year? Because we already talked about, regardless of who's at quarterback, the foundation of his offense is running the ball. If that's what you want to be and who you want to be, I don't necessarily know if paying a wide receiver $25, $27, $30 million a year fits into that mold. So with that, I feel like the answer to your question is it depends on who's making those decisions. And I don't know if Terry is going to be making those decisions. This offense is going to be very interesting. It's so many question marks. And to invest that type of money into a guy where, like you said, you don't know who's going to be throwing him the rock. And pretty soon, their offensive line is old, man. Jake Matthews, can he continue to play? He probably is going to answer to him is going to be answer for him is going to be yes.
Yeah.
But at some point, you got to get somebody in there that's worthy of not just being a viable backup, but somebody who is worthy of taking over, because that time is coming, because Father Time is undefeated. So, yeah, I don't know if I would be so quick to give him an extension at this moment. So he will probably have to wait. I will have a real conversation with his agent and say, hey, man, we're going to take care of you when the time is right.
Yeah.
I
think that makes sense, Jarvis, because, I've been operating for like 6 months. Oh, it's inevitable that they're going to pay Drake after the season. That's going to happen. There's
right.
What else are they going to do?
Right, exactly.
And now, because of, again, all the question marks that you're mentioning, and it's like, okay, what is the future? What is the path moving forward? It's like, I don't know if that's as automatic as I thought it have been thinking this entire time. So that's going to be, I think, an interesting question. I think Jake Matthews is going to say, Jarvis, I take what you just said as a sign of disrespect. Of course, I'm going to play till I'm 40 years old, like my father, and how dare you, sir? But I agree 100% with you, Jarvis. Like, the Falcons have to plan accordingly. If Jake's going to play another 5 years, hey, I will happily sit here and watch that old man, rubbing Ben Gay on his knees before he gets out there.
With the double knee braces with the brackets on the side, like the old school joints.
Give up zero pressures as Jake does, just smelling like menthol the whole game.
So,
you gotta like this season, if anything you learn a lesson from this season, like, you got to build some depth for your football team. You got to have some plan Bs on your football team. You can't go all in on, this is definitely
preferably some cheap plan Bs, cheap plan Bs.
Yeah. Okay. I won't go down that road, but let's talk about Jessie Bates. That
was a nice segue.
Yeah. So you mentioned it, Xavier Watts, an ascending player, coming off, I think, a rough game against Carolina, probably the worst game he's played this season.
Sure.
But like all in all, kind of a blip more so than, a trend with him this season, and certainly one of the more consistent players that we have seen from this rookie class, just because he's been out there every snap, making plays and doing all that stuff. And going back to that conversation I had with Trayshawn Diaz of the Falcoholic back in June, sort of, it was framed as, we know Jessie was in Cincinnati, played on that Super Bowl team, came to Atlanta as part of a free agent class that was, whether you think they were right for that, but we're expecting to be on an ascending team that was going to be competing in the playoffs. And obviously the Falcons have not sniffed the playoffs really. In 3 years that he's been here, he'll be entering a contract year next year, Jessie Bates, that is. You're the Falcons, you want to create some cap space, especially if you're trying to improve your roster. An easy way to do that is extending him, and Jessie's still 28, 29, something like that. And so, it seemed like, again, another kind of no-brainer type of move, given how well he's played. Obviously, this season has not lived up to the expectations. I still think Jessie's probably playing better than probably what popular perception is, but it has been a little bit more inconsistent for him this year than we have grown accustomed to in the 2 previous years. And so now you sit there and you go, like, do you want to lock yourself into a top 5 safety or whatever for 2-3 more years at this point, especially if the general direction of the Falcons is going to be more of a rebuild sort of situation. So what say you with the future of Jessie Bates, and how much does Xavier Watson and possibly a Billy Bowman factor into that?
I don't think Billy Bowman factors into that equation, my decision making. If I'm sitting there looking at, okay, if I'm weighing my options, and let's just say I'm the new general manager of the Atlanta Falcons. Don't cringe, don't turn your radio off, or don't turn your phone off. So just follow me here. I'm taking Billy Bowman out of the equation. I like him at that nickel spot. He's gonna stay there. I'm looking at Xavier. as being that post safety going forward for the future. And I'm trying to get cheaper. I got to get cheaper somewhere. Yeah. And if it's a matter of me being able to work some magic with Jessie, like, hey man, want to take a little pay cut here and maybe there. I know that sounds crazy, but those are the type of conversations you're gonna have to have in order to get this thing back right. Jessie had his blips this year. He had some blips last game. Too much for my comfortability, but I think that if I'm the general manager of this team and I'm making decisions, I have to take a look at Jessie. Just as hard as it was for Terry to cut Grady Jarrett, that's the type of decision that's going to have to be for me, because I can't have, with so many questions at the most important position on this field, and it hurts me to say that because I feel like edge rushers are super important. They're so important because they put those guys on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? They get paid to put those guys on the ground. I can't invest that type of money into a guy like Jessie Bates. I was just about to say, but he's more than that. He's a guy. Like, that's a guy. Having a guy like that on your team in this moment, knowing that I'm not competing for a playoff. I'm not competing for a playoff spot in 2026. That's it's gonna be tough, but that will be the decision I'll make. I will move towards figuring out a way what makes sense for the team and not trying to bring him back or give him an extension.
That puts him firmly on as a trade candidate, right? Especially,
right.
Someone's going to value Jessie Bates, and especially for a team that lacks draft picks like that.
Yeah, I know that hurts you. I know. I can tell.
Oh, of course it hurts me, Thomas. Of course it does.
But you feel me though, right? Like,
yeah, I know. I'm
not just hating. You know what I'm saying?
My head understands. My heart can't take it, Travis.
And that's the part that sucks, man. When you have these situations, the situation that they're in right now, it's going to be a lot of hard conversations. What do you do with Caden Ellis? Is he a guy that you bring back? Or what would his contract look like? And are you going to move Jalen Walker to his spot? Kind of be a combo coverage, being that versatile guy that can be a stack linebacker for you, then move to the edge and you kind of go play around with those bare fronts, on a defensive line. Yeah. Man. Like, it's a lot. Like, if they bring it, they tear it down to the studs, it's going to be a lot. It's going to be a lot of decisions. They have so many decisions to make if they do that. So, I'm just interested to see who's going to be doing it. Who's going to be pulling the trigger.
Yeah. So, as you guys can tell, we have a lot to unpack as we look ahead to the 2026 offseason. But we will keep us focused here. Maybe we might even say locked on this Week 12 action between the Atlanta Falcons and Saints. And, we're talking defense. Let's keep the conversation going and sort of, because the defense is the only thing worth watching, what do we want to see from this defense in this game? And I think it's probably going to be, shucking Shough. So we'll break that down as we wrap up today's Locked On Falcons. The NFL season is going strong and the NBA season is getting started, and you want to get into the stadium or arena. There's nothing quite like being surrounded by fans and cheering on your favorite home team. But let's be honest, getting tickets to see some of these teams can be a hassle, whether we're talking the queues, the login screens, and the prices jumping at checkout. It can be frustrating. That's why you got to use Gametime. Gametime is fast, easy, and backed by the Gametime guarantee, which means you'll get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, with all fees included, The price you see is the price you pay. And don't forget, what you see is what you get with the panoramic seat view. So you can preview exactly what you'll be seeing when you get inside that stadium or arena. And so you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime by downloading Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. So wrapping up today's Locked On Falcons, we talked about this on the Falcon Squad, which, of course, as Jarvis mentioned, you can catch here on Locked On Falcons, as well as Locked On Sports Atlanta. That's also the two homes for the Falcon Squad post-game 1 hour breakdown that we will be having Sunday after this Falcons Saints game. Hate week is just not hitting the same, Jarvis, as it normally does because of all it's like, oh yeah, and we're playing the Saints. What another thing to throw into the conversation, given all the other stuff that's going down this week. But boy, I would hate to see Tyler Shough, begin this rivalry by getting a W. So I want to see the Falcons get after him and do the opposite of what they did last week against Bryce Young, which is played a very conservative game plan. When it came to, we're just going to play again. We're not going to get into it, Jarvis.
I know, man. I know we can't go there because I feel like we could do a 30-minute show on the Panthers game alone and that game plan but I have to say this, man. I don't understand that mindset. I go back to that first game of the year when they played against the Bucs. And I remember doing a post-game show on the Falcon Squad. And we were just like, you can feel the difference. You can see the difference in this defense. Like, and that's what another thing that gives me hope that we haven't brought up, that we talked about on the Falcon Squad show. Agent Zero is more than likely going to be back. Because we know with Rob, man, can get a little weird week to week, day to day, week to week, day to day. I don't know.
I feel good about it.
He has a leg. Games, we know he has a leg, sir. He's a human being. He has a leg. Where on the leg? Where on the knee? It's just so many things that when it comes to injuries and Rob, man, he can be a little weird from an interpretation standpoint. But I feel like that game just really showed how much you miss a guy like Divine Diablo. Just that second level coverage has just been awful since he's been gone. And I don't know if that was the part of the whole soft coverage thing, but man, I look at it like this. Who are you? You aggressive attack, play some man coverage and lock up and get out to the quarterback. I'd rather go down like that than just being waterboarded up and down the field and giving up touchdowns, that way. I don't buy that. And that game plan just threw me off, man. I was just like, bro, it's 4th and 4 and the game is on the line. What are you doing, sir?
It's you mentioned Diablo coming back, and I'm working on an article about his impact on this defense. And was looking up some numbers today, and basically this year when Divine Diablo's on the field, the Falcons passer rating allowed is 35 points lower than what it has been when he's off the field. So basically quarterbacks have a passer rating of, I think, 111 when he's not been in the game, and 77 when he has been in the game. So that's one of many stats that basically show that how much better this defense is when he's been on the field. And so hopefully they'll get that boost and look like that week 1 defense that you were talking about. Another stat I was looking up was, because again, not to harp on the Panthers game, but that conservative rush plan is just like the antithesis of what this defense does well. And I was looking up the numbers in terms of, because one of my more controversial statements on this podcast over the weeks has been like the main reason why the Falcons pass rush has, done a 180 this year is because of them being a lot more aggressive with their scheme and blitzing a lot more. And I was looking at the numbers, and they only have basically like 9 sacks this year when they've rushed 9 out of their 34 sacks. And like one of those was like Zach Harrison being unblocked against Washington. So it's really been like 8 sacks where they've been able to rush.
James Pierce was unblocked on one of his too.
Yeah. And then I was like looking at what their pressure rate was, because like watching the games, I'm like, yeah, they're getting pressure when they're rushing 4, but not necessarily getting sacks. But then I was like looking up the numbers over at True Media, and the Falcons are dead last in the NFL in terms of total pressures when they rush 4, and they're 27th in pressure rate when they rush 4, but they're like number 1 in pressures when they rush 5 or more, and they're like number 3 in pressure rate when they rush 5 or more. And so, like you said, Jarvis, like they're a good defense when they blitz. They're not a good defense when they don't blitz. And so it's like, just blitz. It ain't complicated, and it's a live by the sword, die by the sword mentality. So I understand why, like, in certain situations you may be vulnerable to do it, but like this is kind of your one strength on defense, and so
good things happen when you blitz. And most time teams can't say that. Like the personnel that you have on the field, they do really well when you blitz, when you're aggressive, because it matches up with what the mentality that you say that you want to have and who you are. Offensive side of football, not so much. We want to be we got out Atlanted. No, that's who you want to be. And you haven't showed a consistency on that side of football. But defensively, when you say, hey, we're going to heat your quarterback up on a consistent basis, they do well. So continue to do that. And guess what? I ain't going to be mad if somebody misses the tackle and the quarterback makes an amazing play, because guess what? You forced him to do that. Like when you sit back in those situations where you're supposed to bring pressure, most quarterbacks are going to make the right throw, and they don't have to be great. I'm telling you, Baby Bryce is not that good. I know it's hard for people to see that because it seems like he just goes off every time he plays the Falcons. So when you put your guys in situations where they're not being aggressive, like I feel like you're beat before the ball is even snapped.
Yeah, basically the last thing I'll add from that Panthers game, like that Dowdle screen came on a blitz, right?
Yeah.
And Carolina schemed it up well. They were like, okay, they're being aggressive. We'll and so that's why I say, like, it's live by the sword, die by the sword. And so we've seen the Falcons get burned a couple of times. The Dolphins were able to get them on a screen pass for a score as well in that game. And so, like, it's one of those things where it's not necessarily this foolproof strategy, but I think what you're getting at, Jarvis, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is like you have an identity on defense. Don't run away from that identity. Embrace it. And if teams are going to burn you sometimes, then so be it. But this is who you are, and this is what you need to be.
Yeah, man. And the thing about it is, you had to get to that point where both of us are comfortable saying that's who you are. You know how we got to that point? You had success. When you have success doing things in the NFL, and you set out to be that, like I'm saying, the antithesis of that is the offense side of football. They set out to run the ball, it's foundation, but when people stop it, you have no answer whatsoever. Like you can't go the exact opposite of that in those moments where offenses are begging you to be who you are, right? And it just so happened that you got caught slipping with the Rico Dowdle piece. I'll be okay with that because you were doing what you do. That's who you are. And the thing where I get upset is you getting beat doing some other stuff, some James stuff. Like you can't get beat doing James stuff because James got fired for doing that. I don't want to see you get fired, Mr. Olbrich.
Yeah.
I like you. I really do.
Yeah. So we will see if the return of Divine Diablo, as well as maybe some other pieces on the defensive side of the ball in the secondary room, leads to Jeff Ulbrich being like, oh, yeah, I can dial up some blitzes because I got the coverage on the back end to lock it down. This week, and we're going to make Shough go through.
Shuck up. He's going to shuck up.
Yeah. I was trying to come up with a pun. It's like, wait, I don't think I did this right.
You want to make him shuck up this weekend?
Yeah.
I'll be down there. I'll be in New Orleans this weekend. So yeah.
Are you going to be live on location, Jarvis, for the post game?
Yes, I'll be on location for the post game. Yes.
Okay, so
I'm gonna be loud and everything. Well, most everyone, they'll make their way down to the post game pressure. So but I'm gonna stay here for you all. Right after the game, I'll be right there in the Saints press box. And I'm gonna try to be as loud as possible, like to the point where, they might not never let me get another credential coming down there. So I'm gonna have to come as a fan next time. But don't figure it out, man.
So make sure you tune in for the post game on Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On Falcons, hour after that final whistle to see, if Jarvis is in the press box or somehow in a room locked up because security got him in the stadium because he was making trouble in the press box. But whatever the case may be, we will all be tuned in for that. I don't know if we'll be all tuned in to watch the game. So, if you have better things to do on Sunday, make sure you tune in for the post game. You don't want to miss it because there's a high probability that the post game will be more entertaining than the actual game. But we'll see. We'll see. So make sure you check that out, as well as Locked On NFL to get you geared up for this Week 12 action all across the league. It is all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the now #1 sports podcast network on the planet. Your team every day.